Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a great week so far. We are going to be in Isaiah chapter 44 today for our lesson this week. And so we're on Unit 13, Session 5. Unit 13, Session 5, we're finishing up Unit 13 this week. And as always, we are finishing up with a doctrinal lesson, and it's on the futility of idolatry. So, in other words, the pointlessness of it, the silliness of it, if you will, of idolatry. And always find it an interesting subject to talk about because as much as we rebuke idolatry and as we see it as foolish and we see it as futile, um, it's the sin I think that most of us are the most guilty of, because it creeps in very minor ways. It creeps in ways that we sometimes, if we're not careful, we don't even notice. And so I hope that this lesson speaks to your heart as you're teaching, because it's just studying it. I was reminded of just, man, like there's some things in my life that maybe are idols, or if I'm not careful, they may become idols. And so I pray that you let the Lord speak to you before you speak this message to our students, because I think it's a convicting message, but it's also it's a good reminder. So your curriculum breaks it down um, into three sections. Uh, this passage tends to be it's a little difficult to understand and to read, and so I would not advise reading the entire passage. Um, and You can, but I think there's certainly some language in there that will make it difficult to keep attention, because some of it is repetitive and some of it is, um, prophetic books are written as poetry, and so there's a lot of just images in there that will be difficult to explain. So, but the outline is pretty simple. Verses 1 through 6 is speaking on the fact that the Lord is the only God. In fact, in verse 6, it says, "This is what the Lord, the King of Israel, and its Redeemer, and the Lord of hosts says, I am the first and I am the last. There is no God but me." And this sets the precedence for the rest of the passage, and really for us in our lives. If there truly was another God that was equal to our God, or even if he wasn't equal, but he was like the minor league of gods, you can make an argument that perhaps that God would be worthy of our worship. But it's clear that there is no other God. Um, what we know about God is that he is self sustaining, meaning that there's nothing that he is relying on to exist. And he is self originating, meaning that there was no one created him, right? He always has been. Which is, it makes our brains hurt because everything we think about and everything we speak of has a beginning date or an end date, um, or both. And so we can't really think about that. Or we can, but we can't quite fathom something that's always existed and always will. That is what we call God. And so there is no other God but our Lord. And that sets the standard for the rest of the passage. I believe your notes go into um, the next point being idols cannot compare to God. Idols cannot compare to God. Verse 9, all who make idols are nothing, and what they treasure does not profit. Their witnesses do not see or know anything, so they will be put to shame. I mean, when we think about the futility of idolatry, it's it's just worthless. There's nothing that compares. And idols are, they all have the same characteristic. Number one, they're temporary, and number two, they're man-made. So they're temporary and they're man-made. Temporary meaning, obviously, I mean, they're not going to last forever. They might be really cool and they might seem very worthy at the time, but they are all temporary. There will not be an eternal worship of this idol in our lives. But secondly, they're man made. And this includes everything, right? Even other religions. Um, and it's ironic because the Israelites, they were worshiping a man made God, a statue, um, that claimed to have divine origins, but we all know it was just someone that built that. And it's so silly for us to think that something that man can create is something that's worthy of man's worship. It just isn't. And so just think about that. And then finally, um, Finally, idolatry is foolish. So you've got the Lord is the only God, idols cannot compare to God, and idolatry is foolish. And this really goes back to our first point. If God is the only God, which he is, then it is pointless and it is foolish and it is a waste of our time to pursue and chase other things. And so I would really challenge you as we speak this message, be vulnerable to the point where you're not glorifying the devil through your rebellion and your sin, but you're glorifying Christ and how he's overcome that idol issue in your life. Be willing to share your own flaws and your own failures, because our students are walking through the same thing. And I've oftentimes learned to respect those that can give evidence of, this is when I was chasing after this idol in my life. And a lot of times for us, it's not just before Christ. A lot of times, especially if you've been a Christian for a long time, or if you're like me, I got saved when I was 6 years old. So I've had more sin in my life since I got saved than before, because I was 6 years old. And so there's the idolatry that's been there. Be able to share from your experiences, right? We don't rejoice in our experiences, but we rejoice in the fact that Jesus has made all things new, including the perspective that we look at our own failures, right? We don't have to look at that with shame if we've been redeemed from it. We now use that as a point to say, hey, either avoid this, or God can take the same brokenness in your life and make it beautiful. And so I hope that helps you as you prepare this week. Let me know if you have any questions. I really am a resource to you guys. I want to help you. And so if you have anything, reach out. And just again, thank you so much for what you do. I was thinking about this the other day with all our volunteers, but especially our Sunday school teachers. You guys are special, right? Like, you guys are where discipleship is happening for students. And I really, really appreciate that. Hope you'll have an awesome day, and we'll see you Sunday.